I'm very, very happy to introduce to the three of you who don't already know our speaker, Bud Hulsey, the speaker who will be occupying the podium in just a couple of minutes. Most of you have had a professional relationship with this man, in light of the fact that he's been in law enforcement, and most of you people have confronted law enforcement one time or another. But in any event, it's always like to hear something about somebody who's a speaker that people don't know about. So I'm going to offer a little bit of background. A fellow named what was his name? Who was it that said, "Go west, young man"? Go west.
Horace Greeley.
Horace Greeley. That's the guy. Well, here's a guy who did the flip side of that. This man was born in Arizona. I think he was the first white man in Arizona. So anyway, and he began moving. He moved from Arizona to Durango, Colorado. Durango, Colorado is the epitome of the western town. It's about the last place in Colorado before you get to the Grand Canyon. Anyway, then he moved to South Carolina, where he got a college education. Still moving east. And then he was a little bit disoriented because he didn't move east, he moved north to Kingsport. And interestingly enough, he started playing piano in Arizona, and he's become a musician over the years. And music brought this man to Kingsport from Arizona. And apparently, Mark Addington and his friends had a real good music program because he joined the police department in 1977 and served as a Kingsport policeman in varying levels of progression for 36 years. When he retired, he couldn't stay away from the public, so he ran for the seat that represents most of Kingsport in the Tennessee State Legislature. And he was elected in 2013. So here's a man who's got almost a decade of service in the legislature, looking out for people in Kingsport, which represents most of all of them. So please join me in welcoming Bud Hulsey.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that very much. Ken has spent a great deal of time out there around southwestern Colorado, and we talk about the narrow gauge steam engine train that used to run behind my house, hauling freight from Alamosa when I was a kid growing up, and he's been out there, and he even said he was in Silverton, and I said, well, I'm not really proud of it, but I used to play the piano on the bent elbow in Silverton. So it's very kind of you to invite me here today, and thank you for the food. It's good to see so many of you that I only see on occasion, but I've known for many, many, many years. I appreciate your commitment to this town, this area, and what you do. This has been an interesting year, to say the least. We got a whole lot of good work done, I think. This session seemed to be overshadowed by the circus the last 3 weeks of session, but there was some really good work done. It's the biggest budget that Davey Hawk and I know, and I'm so glad Davey's here because Davey's on committees that I am not on. He's on finance and knows everything about it, and he's on health and knows everything about it, and those are committees that I'm not on. Don't know a whole lot about it, so if you have questions about any of those issues, just ask Davey. He can tell you. But this is probably is the biggest budget number that I have ever seen since I've been here, and he has too. It's $56.2 billion. I think when I got elected, it was about 34, somewhere in there. And so it's grown, almost doubled. And why is that? Well, it's because of the growth in this state. We have had incredible revenues in this state. People move in here and the growth is huge, and you can't take the overtures that come in and just stick it in the bank. You have to put it in the budget. So that's why it grows all the time. And why do people move here? Well, they move here because we got one of the best states to live in. If if you're talking about business and business protection and latitude and liberty, and individual people move here, you would be surprised the amount of folks who coming in for the last 10 years, but especially the last 2 or 3, that are trying to escape tyranny in their own states. And they move out of there and come here. And because we have a reputation of being a free state, and we have a reputation to put an emphasis on liberty and constitutionality, and holding true to those things. And so I was speaking last week to about 150 people here in East Tennessee, and asked the question, how many of you have moved into Tennessee from other states in the last 10 years? And about 60% of the crowd raised their hand. And it's interesting to me because it's these folks who come to meetings and get involved in meetings and want to know about the preservation of liberty, and you better watch out for this and you better watch out for that, and don't do this, and watch out for aliens doing this, and here's how they encroach, and here's how the program goes, and here's how state government begins to take away your liberty. Be careful. And it's funny that they are the folks who are committed to being up to date and concerned and apprised of what's going on, and a lot of folks who've lived here our whole life kind of take it for granted and don't worry about it, and well, it won't happen here. Well, the worm can turn. So I am proud of what Tennessee is. I'm proud of what it stands for. I'm proud of the atmosphere that men and women before me have laid down and put in planks and put in place to defend liberty and be constitutional. Out of that budget, we of course spend a lot of money. And out of a $56.2 billion budget, we did provide a bunch of tax cuts, $400 million worth of them actually. You have a 3-month food grocery sales tax exemption coming up for 3 months, where in August, September, and October you don't have to pay sales tax on your groceries. There's a $124 billion business tax. Davey could explain what this means. I don't know what it means, but it exempts up to $500,000 of property value from minimum measure, whatever that means. It looks good on paper, and I believe in it and voted for it, but I don't know what it is. When you talk about school safety, and that's a big deal right now, we put a lot of money in this too. There's several $1 million to go into beefing up schools and hardening schools and a system to do it. There's money in the budget now for an SRO officer in every school. If you already have an SRO officer, this very well may allow you to get another one. So you can have 2 or maybe even 3 if the school's big enough. There's money in this budget to put a Homeland Security officer in absolutely every county. And by the way, they don't have any connection to the federal government. I checked on that. These are all local THP boys that have been trained in this kind of thing. And there's one in every county, and that is the whole focus of their job is to deal with the schools in those counties, to beef up and harden up those schools, going through drills, going through protocol to establish systems where the school can't be breached by somebody who wants to hurt them. We added $8 million for behavioral health in schools. There's money now, $14 million for a grant fund for private schools to put an SRO in. They have to apply for the grant, but they can get it. There's also safety money for public schools who don't have enough money to harden their school up and need a grant to apply for that, and there's money for that too. Things like security systems and better locks, better windows, how you configure the front where people come in, all those kinds of things that would go to harden up a school. There is now grant money available for that. In education in general, there's a lot of money went there, earmarked $125 million for teacher raises. And the program is to get teachers to a minimum of $50,000 starting pay when they hire on, or at least the minimum base pay at $50,000. That's never been done here, of course, but that's what the goal is, and the money's in there for it. We also added money to a 6-month paid family leave for teachers. We put in $1 billion in the TCAT program to refurbish, to rebuild, to add on to all the physical things that need to be done in the TCAT program. That's a lot of money. There's been a whole lot of discussion and some folks complaining and some folks not complaining. And that's an interesting thing about being a state representative. Davey will tell you the same thing. You'll have an issue and you will get, for example, in this issue, you will get school teachers who email you and say, yes, I'm in middle school or I'm in high school and I got kids coming in here who can't even read on a third grade level. Yes, you need to do this. And yes, this is a good program. And then I get emails from other teachers and parents who say, this is terrible for to hold my kid back, or even threaten to hold him back, and the pressure that goes on from taking one test, and this shouldn't be wrapped around. And I'm not saying all those arguments don't have validity to them. I think some of them do. But this didn't come about in a couple of weeks. This came about in a 2-year sit-down of dealing with administrators and teachers and boards of education to come up with some kind of solution, because 66% of third grade kids in this state cannot read on grade level. So you cannot ignore that. You have to do something to fix it. So how do you fix it? Well, there's money behind this program to fix it. This says if your kid's approaching but can't get there and he has to have a tutor, the tutor's paid for. If he goes to learning camp in the summer, the learning camp's paid for. His transportation to get to the learning camp is paid for. The food that he eats when he gets at the learning camp is paid for. The teacher who teaches extra time and extra duty to teach the kid is paid for. So all of this is in the budget to try to push the academic issue with reading, at least, because the studies have all been proven that if a kid can't read on grade level by 4th grade and they're messed up, it affects the rest of their whole education, and the failure rate's huge because you can't read. So that's where we're at, and some, like I say, some folks like it and some folks don't. Economic development, there's a whole lot of money pumped in for that. You heard about the Transportation Modernization Act. And if you've driven down to Nashville, you know what a mess it is just trying to get through the town. I hate coming home on Thursday nights from session, because if I hit Knoxville anywhere between 3:30 and 8 o'clock at night, you stop and go and stop and go and stop and go, and I hate it. I absolutely despise it. So there's not enough money in the budget to fix the congestion issues in the metropolitan areas and still fix all the stuff in the rural areas like us up here that need the roads and the bridges need to get fixed. There's not enough money. So that's where this program came from, where the design to build what's called choice lanes. And some people say those are just, toll roads. If you want to call it that, I guess you can, but the existing highway system that's here doesn't change. Every interstate that we have will stay an interstate, and you can drive down that interstate. You don't pay money to drive on it. If you want to avoid the headache and you want to get there faster, these lanes, from what I can see, are patterned after like Austin, Texas, and places like that, where they actually build the road up above the existing road. And when you get on the ramp, you got a card reader that reads your license plate, and they send you a bill. And that is going to be privatized to private companies. The only thing I asked about that when we were digging around talking about it, and I'm not on transportation committee, but I do drink coffee every morning at 6:30 with the chairman of transportation. But I asked, are we ensuring that no foreign companies going to build these choice lanes? That these are United States, preferably Tennessee companies employing Tennessee people. And yes, and that is the answer. That was a big factor on my issue with the whole thing. So that, I don't know when the start date is, but that is hopefully in that package. All the money that we needed here on this end of the state to do road and bridge repair will be there. In fact, they're putting $750 million in this budget in each TDOT region. So, and then there's additional to that. Pat could probably tell you the exact figure on what Kingsport gets out of that. Here's one of these things that's in the budget, and Davey can explain this better than I can, but the budget comes as a package. You have time before that to argue or fuss or say, I don't like this or I don't like that, but when it gets to the House floor, it's a done deal, and you either vote for it or you vote against it. Well, nobody wants to vote against the budget because you need it. But, excuse me, nobody likes, and Republicans particularly hate, and leadership hates, to try and file a budget amendment on the House floor. In 9 years, I've seen that try to happen, and it's never succeeded, ever.
In fact, it's very rare that any amendment gets added on the House floor. And I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. But there's things in the budget you don't like, but you can't just not vote for the whole budget because there's things that you don't like about it. There's some things, there's a diaper program in there with several $1 million going to give away diapers to kids under 2. I have some problems with that. There's a whole lot of money in this budget to give THP officers a raise. I have no problem with giving THP officers a raise. They deserve a raise. It's the governor's raise in the budget is so substantial. It is so substantial that now what's happening is police agencies like Kingsport and sheriff's departments are beginning now to lose officers that they have invested money in and trained and sent to the academy and paid for their uniforms, did all the front end training on them, got them in the system, and they're starting to lose officers to go to THP because the money sometimes doubles their pay a year. Now, again, I'm not fussing about giving THP a raise. They need a raise. They deserve a raise. It's just when you get things out of whack a little bit, the collateral damage from that begins to cost a lot of money. Ronnie Lawson right down here in Hawkins County has lost 5 deputies to that. So now we have got to go back to the table and come up with some creative ways to help cities and counties retain officers that they've invested money in and keep a staff well-staffed, even if it getting old retirees like me to go back and work part-time. So, which, by the way, I work part-time as a police officer in Bluff City, 2 days a week, 10 hours a day. There was some rumors about it, so I'm just telling you I've been doing that, yeah. So don't come through there speeding. The governor also wanted 100 more slots, THP slots. All right, I've got to hurry here. There's some things that I think are really, really good that didn't get any airplay. They didn't get any hoopla, but they were just solid, really good bills that some were controversial, but some didn't nobody knew. But House Bill 1 and Senate Bill 1 says there's no medical facility or doctor or medical organization that can cut healthy body parts off of kids or give them hormones or puberty blockers or gender altering or affirming treatment on a minor for the person of enabling the minor to identify with or live as or purportedly identical inconsistent with the immutable characteristics of who they are. Now, that's a big deal. That's a big deal, but it's a good bill. I have to hurry here. I told you that you can't put an amendment on the House floor very successfully at all. I'm 100% in favor of this bill. It's a good bill. We need it. I had amendment, but this bill doesn't come through any of my committees. So if it doesn't come through any of my committees, I have no avenue to put an amendment on it. I have no avenue to argue against or for it till it comes to the House floor. That's my only chance. So I ran an amendment that I thought was incredibly important to go to this bill. And the person who sponsored it didn't want it. Nobody does. Nobody wants you to mess around with their bill after you've fought it and got it to the House floor. But the amendment did 2 things. It took a word out of one sentence and it added 3 words to another sentence. And my amendment said on this bill that it took out the word dignity, because in this one sentence in the bill it said that the state has a vested interest in the dignity of children. That scares me, and let me tell you why. Because that word was used 44 times in trying to prove that the Constitution of the United States grants dignity to people. It was that argument over dignity that won the Oberfeld case that forever changed the definition of what marriage is in this country. So I didn't want that word. The second thing that I wanted to change in the amendment added 3 words. It said that a child in Tennessee has a right at common law to not be harmed. Common law, and by the way, there was a lawyer in the House floor that was arguing against those 3 little words to keep them out, and he gave the most convoluted, twisted up definition of common law that I ever heard in my life. It made me thank God I didn't go to law school. Common law, as you understand, is law, English law, that was in existence before the Constitution was ever written. Some of common law was enumerated in the Constitution, but that's why the framers put in the Ninth Amendment. It says in the Ninth Amendment that whatever's not enumerated in the Constitution from common law, the people have a right to retain. That's huge, because it is the common law argument that was argued in Dobbs, because under common law, it was illegal and a crime for you to kill your unborn child. It was the argument of common law in Dobbs that overturned Roe and pushed it back to the states and said, no, you don't have a constitutional right to kill your child. So I said on the House floor, this is so important because that's what the Supreme Court is listening to now. Please use it as another plank for the Attorney General to argue when we get sued, and we will, because Arkansas and Alabama ran the same law and they both lost. I don't want to lose. It's a big bill. It's a big deal. Let me tell you just a few more that are big deals, that I thought were big deals. Didn't get a lot of airplay, but we passed a bill that says any government or government agent or an alien who is sanctioned by the United States or whose government is antithetical to our constitutional form of government, in other words, our enemies, cannot own real property in the state of Tennessee. That's a big deal. That is a big deal. If they own it now, they have 2 years to divest themselves of it. The last I read, Communist China owns 345,000 acres of farmland in this country. So this is a good bill, and like I said, didn't get a bunch of airplay, but it's a big deal. There's another one. This made some people upset, but I got emails from teachers who keep their head down, and they say, please don't tell anybody I'm emailing you, and I don't want to get in trouble, but I'm scared to death because we're expected to take a 14-year-old kid who decides that her name's really Rebecca, but she wants to be called Frank, and I can't keep up with all of my friends. I'm going to lose my job, and so we passed a bill that said that no school teacher in the state of Tennessee can be disciplined, fired, terminated, or sued for using the wrong pronouns. That might not be a big deal to you, but it's a big deal to a whole lot of teachers. And I think it's important. Didn't get any airplay, but it's good. The drag show thing, I got to tell you about that. This came through my committee. I'm the chairman of Criminal Justice Full. And when that bill came up in the committee, it's packed. I mean, the committee room is big, and it is packed. And they're all around the wall, and I have to run them out. If they can't find a seat, they got to go outside. There's monitors out there can watch. And, of course, half of the group is dressed in drag. And listen, the focus of this bill doesn't prevent a violation of First Amendment rights, of freedom of expression. If a man wants to dress up like a woman and do cartwheels down the middle of the street, banging the drums, singing Kumbaya, that ain't illegal. Okay, he can do that. That's not what this bill dealt with. This bill dealt with when you move across the line and sexualize your performance and make them lewd, you cannot do that in front of children. That's the focus of the bill. Well, this is a big deal, and they packed the place out, and half of them are, like I say, are dressed up in drag, and the other half are supporting the bill, or at least some are supporting the bill. And I have three people scheduled to speak against the bill, 3 people to schedule for the bill. So the 3 people in drag come up and talk about, well, no one of them in drag. He was a lawyer for the draggies. And so she comes up, and she's telling about how awful this bill is, it's a violation, and it's targeting the LGBTQ community, and how terrible and awful this is. Well, they got through. Then a lady for the bill was very articulate on what happens when you sexualize children. Then the second guy who stands up to speak, he comes to the well, he speaks, and he's against the bill. You should have seen it. He flew in from Kansas City, and he says, I want you to know that I'm homosexual. And I want you to know that I belong to the LGBTQ XYZ community. And then he turns like this and he says to all these draggies over here, but you need to leave kids alone. Oh my, it only took about 10 seconds for them to eat their own. I mean, it was just, they just turned just like that. But this is a big deal. This bill had nothing to do with violation of First Amendment rights. And now you got a federal judge in Memphis who enjoins this bill, but as I understand, the enjoinment is just for Shelby County. So I really don't know what's going to happen to it. The reason we ran the bill is because videos were beginning to surface showing simulated sex acts with almost nude men in front of children. And we had to do that. Let me tell you one more and then I got to shut up because we're done here. There was a bill that didn't get any airplay but was great. I don't know if you know of public education now in schools, places that teach this. They have transgender studies that are extracurricular, transgender and gender studies. If you don't want your kid to go to those, you have to opt out. Otherwise, your kid automatically gets enrolled. We ran a bill that turned it around and said, if you want your kid to go to that, you have to opt him in. Good. Otherwise, he don't go. Good. Great bill. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. I don't have time to tell you, but you've been very kind. And if you got questions, come up and I'll be up here with Davey and I'll try to answer what I can. Thank you so much.